There comes a time in life, often after 70, when we no longer look for instructions, but long instead for insight. Not more noise, but meaning. Not more opinions, but understanding. If you're watching this, perhaps you too have reached that sacred threshold where questions change, from what should I do next to how can I live the rest of my life with dignity, peace, and quiet strength. Today, I want to share with you something more than advice. I want to offer you a kind of elder wisdom, words passed down not through textbooks or manuals, but through years of experience, of silent disappointments, of small triumphs no one clapped for, and of lessons learned when no one else was watching. This video was inspired by the reflections of a retired professor, and what moved many older adults to tears was not the information, but the quiet truth behind every word. In the next few minutes, you won't hear theories, you'll hear life. And if you listen closely, you may find that these messages were not just meant for someone else, they were meant for you, for your next chapter, for your own peace of mind. So if something in your heart tells you to stay, I invite you to subscribe, to share this with someone who may need a moment of stillness, and to reflect along the way. Because sometimes a single phrase, spoken gently and heard at the right time, can change everything. Sometimes the desire to be transparent comes from love, a deep longing to protect, to reassure, to show that we've prepared enough so our children won't worry. And yet as we grow older, there are boundaries that deserve to be protected more fiercely than ever, not out of fear or secrecy, but for the sake of peace. In many American families, especially when parents have reached their 70s or beyond, the topic of money begins to take on a quiet weight. We think sharing every detail of our savings might bring us closer to our children. Perhaps it builds trust. But often it quietly shifts the relationship into a space where expectations begin to bloom, sometimes subtly, sometimes painfully. Once met an elderly gentleman who told me how proud he was that he had managed to save over $250,000 after retiring from a modest government job. He mentioned this to his adult daughter in what he thought was a moment of celebration. Weeks later, she casually suggested that since he was secure, perhaps he could help pay off her mortgage. Then his son found out and began hinting about an early inheritance. The father didn't get angry, he just grew quiet. The dynamic had changed, not because his children were ungrateful, but because the knowledge of his savings began to shape their thinking in ways they didn't even realize. That warm moment of sharing turned into an invisible shift in power and expectation. This is the delicate truth that many older adults face, but rarely speak aloud. Financial independence is one of the last strongholds of emotional freedom in later life. When it is compromised, even unintentionally, so too is our dignity, our ability to make choices on our own terms, our quiet sense of control. Holding this line isn't about withholding love. It's about preserving the space where love can continue without strings attached. At this age, your savings are not just numbers on a bank statement. They are the result of decades of labor, sacrifice, and quiet discipline. They are not just for emergencies. They are your shield, your cushion, your right. So let your generosity remain wise and intentional. Let your legacy be shaped not by disclosure, but by dignity. And if you ever feel torn between sharing and protecting, remember this. Peace is not found in how much others know, but in how securely you walk through the years you have left. As we move deeper into the later chapters of life, it becomes clear that peace is no longer a luxury, it is a necessity. And often that peace begins at home in the small shared moments between two people who have weathered so much together. When you're younger, disagreements can feel like sparks in a fire. That still has plenty of wood. But after 60, arguments don't burn bright, they burn through. They wear down something quiet but essential, the comfort of companionship. Many older couples find themselves locked in familiar patterns, petty squabbles about remote controls, dinner preferences or forgotten errands. But these aren't really about the thing at hand. They're about something deeper, something harder to name. The fear of change, the ache of feeling unheard, or the slow loss of identity that sometimes shadows retirement and aging. And so the person you love most becomes the person you battle most, not out of malice but from years of unspoken fatigue. A woman once shared with me that she and her husband used to argue almost daily about the thermostat. "It sounds ridiculous," she said, "but what we were really fighting about was control. Who still had a say in this house, in this season of life?" Her eyes welled up when she admitted that after he passed, the house felt colder, not because the temperature changed, but because the tension was gone, and with it, the presence she once took for granted. You see, after 60, we are no longer building a life together, we are preserving one. And preservation takes gentleness. It takes a willingness to let go of the need to always be right, and instead embrace the higher need, to be kind. Your spouse is not your mirror to prove yourself to, nor your opponent to out-reason. They are your witness, your teammate, the only one who truly remembers your life with you, day by day, year by year. So if your partner forgets something, let it go. If the routine feels repetitive, breathe through it together. Speak softly, even when you're frustrated. Choose presence over pride. Because in the end, you won't remember who won which argument. You'll remember who sat with you on the quiet evenings when words weren't needed at all. And that, dear listener, is what loyalty in old age truly looks like. And now let's gently turn our attention to something that touches the heart of many older adults, more than they often admit: the deep love for grandchildren and the quiet exhaustion that can come with it. There is no denying the joy a grandchild brings, their laughter, their tiny footsteps across the living room floor, the way they call out grandma or papa with pure affection. It awakens something timeless in us. But that joy, when stretched too far, can quietly become a burden, especially when caregiving shifts from occasional delight to daily responsibility. I've spoken to many seniors who say yes out of love, but find themselves physically depleted and emotionally spent. They skip doctor appointments, cancel long-awaited trips, and abandon hobbies they once treasured, not because they were forced to, but because they didn't know how to say no. And underneath the smiles, there's often a silent fatigue that no one sees. One retired woman from Georgia once told me, with tears in her voice, that she hadn't painted in 3 years since taking on the daily care of her grandkids. "I don't regret the love," she said softly, "but I miss myself." That sentence lingered, because aging gracefully isn't just about staying active. It's about staying connected to who you are outside of your roles. Your golden years are not an extension of your working life or a continuation of parental duties. They are yours, meant for reflection, restoration, and quiet joys that don't require sacrifice. Helping out occasionally is beautiful. It builds a connection. But when helping becomes an obligation, when your day is no longer your own, you slowly begin to disappear behind the schedule of a younger generation. And the truth is, no one can pour from an empty cup, not even a grandparent with the biggest heart. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to say, "I love you, but not today." That is not rejection. It is self-respect. And teaching your children and grandchildren to honor your boundaries is one of the most powerful lessons you can give. Because in the end, it is not the amount of time you spend with them that matters most. It's the presence, the stories, the wisdom you share. When your heart is full and your spirit is rested, let your love be generous, but let it be balanced. You've earned that right. As we move forward together, there's another truth that often hides behind kind intentions and well-meant suggestions: the subtle pressure many older adults feel to let go of their homes. Sometimes it begins with soft encouragement. "Wouldn't it be easier to live with us?" or "You don't need all that space anymore." Other times it's wrapped in worry, as if your independence is a burden rather than a blessing. But what most people don't realize is that a house isn't just a place. It's a memory keeper, a quiet witness to decades of love, loss, routines, and ordinary mornings. Your home has seen you in moments no one else ever has: when you danced alone in the kitchen, when you sat in stillness watching the rain, when you lit a candle for someone long gone. Selling it isn't a transaction, it's a transition. And unless that choice comes from within you, it can feel like a quiet kind of grief. I once spoke with a man from Oregon who moved into his daughter's guest house after she gently insisted it would be simpler for everyone. He said the first few weeks felt warm, But soon his tools stayed boxed, his morning walks shortened, and his once vibrant days grew quiet. I was safe, he told me, but I wasn't at home. It's important to remember that comfort isn't only about convenience. It's also about familiarity, freedom, and small dignities, like making your own coffee the way you like it, or tending a garden no one else understands. And while downsizing can be wise in some cases, it should never be rushed, especially not to please others or avoid confrontation. Your home is your anchor. It gives structure to your days and roots to your spirit. If you ever choose to let it go, let it be because your heart is ready, not because someone else is. There's no shame in holding on to what's yours. You've built this space with years of hard work, quiet discipline, and deep love. Let it continue to protect you, reflect you, and remind you that your independence is not something you owe anyone an explanation for. It's a form of elder wisdom, a quiet stand for the life you've earned. There's a quiet kind of generosity that lives in many older adults, the kind that doesn't announce itself, that simply gives when asked, often without hesitation. It's rooted in years of providing, of putting others first, of believing that if you have enough, then you ought to help. But as we grow older, that beautiful instinct to give must walk hand in hand with something just as important: wisdom. Because not every request for help is genuine, and not every promise will be kept. I've met many seniors who lent money to family or friends out of love, only to find that love tested when the money didn't come back, or when silence replaced gratitude. There's no shame in wanting to support those we care about, but the truth is, in this season of life, your savings are not a tool for someone else's risk. They are your lifeline, your safety, and your well-earned reward for decades of discipline. Woman in Texas once told me she had loaned a substantial sum to her nephew who wanted to start a business. She believed in him, trusted him, and wanted to encourage his independence. But the business failed, and with it, so did their closeness. "It wasn't the money I missed," she said. "It was the way he stopped calling after." That kind of heartbreak lingers far longer than a zero on a statement. Lending money, especially for things that aren't essential, like investments, conveniences, or someone else's overdue bills, carries weight. And for many older adults who no longer have a steady income, even a small loss can change daily comfort into quiet stress. It's easy to assume people will repay, but when they don't, it's you who carries the consequence. So before you give, pause. Ask yourself, if I never see this money again, will I still sleep peacefully at night? If the answer is no, then love from a distance. Offer your care, your time, your listening ear, but guard your savings. Because money, at this stage, is not about accumulation. It's about assurance. And protecting your peace is not selfish, it's necessary. You've spent a lifetime giving. Now is the time to preserve what gives you freedom, dignity, and rest. Let your help be thoughtful, not too automatic, and let your heart remain open, but guided by the quiet voice of self-respect. And finally, we arrive at something both gentle and powerful: the quiet dignity of how you carry yourself, the kindness you choose to show, and the small joys you still allow into your days. These things may seem simple, even trivial to some, but for those of us in the later chapters of life, they are the pillars that keep our spirit young, even as our bodies grow older. I once watched an older man at the park, neatly dressed, shoes polished, wearing a hat that clearly meant something to him. He wasn't going anywhere special. He was simply sitting on a bench, feeding birds, nodding with a soft smile to people walking by. And I thought to myself, there is a man who has not forgotten who he is. You see, the way we present ourselves is not for vanity. It's a gesture of self-respect, a reminder that we still matter. When we dress with care, when we greet the world with warmth, when we smile even when no one is watching, we send a message, not to others but to ourselves, that our days still hold meaning. Kindness, too, is something we must never set aside, even if the world around us feels colder, faster, or more disconnected than it once did. Bitterness ages the heart far more than time ever could. And joy, true joy, doesn't have to come from grand experiences or expensive indulgences. It can live in a quiet morning, in the light falling across your living room floor, in the memory of someone you loved or the sweetness of something warm in your hands. When we allow ourselves to keep noticing, to keep smiling, to keep laughing at the small things, we remain alive in a way that no number can measure. And so, as you look at yourself in the mirror tomorrow morning, straighten your collar, brush your hair, or wear that soft color you've always liked. Make that small gesture of care, not because you're trying to impress anyone, but because your soul deserves to feel seen. In the end, aging gracefully isn't about pretending we're not old. It's about embracing each day with quiet strength, with tenderness, and with the soft but steady belief that we are still growing, still glowing, still worthy of beauty in every form it takes. As we close this conversation, I want to remind you, growing older does not mean fading away. It means becoming more distilled, more deliberate, and more aware of what truly matters. These gentle lessons about setting boundaries, choosing peace over pride, protecting your health and finances, and nurturing joy in small ways are not just advice from a retired professor. They are echoes of elder wisdom that many of us quietly carry but rarely speak aloud. They are the foundations of healthy aging, of aging gracefully, and of living with dignity beyond 70. No matter where you are right now, whether surrounded by family or living alone, whether your days are full or have grown quieter, your presence still matters. Your voice, your memories, your ability to choose what stays and what no longer serves you. All of it is part of a life well lived. So let yourself be seen. Let yourself rest. And most importantly, let yourself feel proud of how far you've come. If any part of today's message spoke to your heart, I invite you to share your reflections in the comments below. Tell us, what life lesson do you carry with you? What insight do you wish others your age could hear? Your story may be the light someone else has been waiting for,